It's story time. We're up to episode 10 of Storytime, chapter 6 of The Blood King. For those of you who have not listened to chapters 1 to 5 and the prologue, I would recommend you go back and start listening from the beginning, because otherwise this ain't gonna make much sense. I am Jess, otherwise known by my author moniker Jelim, and I am super eager to get started, so let's go. Here's chapter 6. Kelsey's worries, of course, came back full force the next morning. Damn, muttered Kelsey as she looked up at the school building, students mingling around the front yard and car park. Dimitri stood beside her and smirked, a bit late for second thoughts. The swirl of ugly teenage feelings ruled this plot of land. Kelsey hated it with a passion. It was the main reason she avoided schools. Puberty was not a friend to empaths. No, Kelsey sighed. I just remembered it being more conservative. Dimitri followed Kelsey's gaze to a group of girls with short skirts and crop tops. He whistled lowly before smiling at his sister. The last time you went to school was in 1912, said Dimitri. And that was only because you refused to be stuck on a ship for a month. Well, clearly I missed one heck of a voyage, replied Kelsey. Even 100 years on, it's not polite to joke about the Titanic, said Dimitri. Kelsey sighed. Let's get this over with before I start joking about genocide. Which one? Asked Dimitri curiously, as if it would honestly matter which one she was talking about. Any. You may be the only one of us who isn't damned, but your sense of humour is as dark as hell, Dimitri observed. Kelsey poked her tongue out at him as she walked forward through the crowd of students towards the front office. She was stopped halfway by the little witch that had bothered Dimitri the previous afternoon. You're not welcome here, Frey, said the witch. Kelsey sighed. Great, just what she needed. A teenage witch who thought she was all that. Sure, she had a decent amount of power, judging from her aura, but not enough to actually be a threat. Being welcome isn't something that tends to bother me after a long life of being shunned. If you'll excuse me, I need to get to the front office. You'll regret showing up, the witch threatened. Just like your coven will regret making a deal with Vincent, said Kelsey as she turned back to the witch with a charming smile. But I'm not too worried about that either. Then Kelsey walked away from the witch with a scowl on her face. The day had just taken a turn for the worse, and she hadn't even walked inside yet. Back-talking is going to get you in serious trouble one of these days, stated Dimitri as he caught up with his sister in reception. I'll deal with it when it happens, replied Kelsey. After receiving her timetable and locker combination, Kelsey walked down the school hall towards her locker. She tried hard not to cringe as she walked, the emotions rolling off the teenagers like fingernails on a chalkboard. God, I hate teenagers. Kelsey mumbled low enough that only Dimitri heard her. They paused before their lockers as Dimitri replied, Bothering you again, huh? It's like I'm in a ship in the middle of a hurricane, said Kelsey. I don't know how I'm going to last. Just breathe through it. I'll be here whenever you need me. Just pick up the phone, said Dimitri. Kelsey nodded and watched as Dimitri backed up and turned down one of the halls. Looking at her timetable, she tried not to notice when a group of skimpily dressed girls approached her. She sensed the strong emotions peeling off of them, and upon realising there was no way to avoid the conversation they wanted to start, she pasted a smile on her face and looked up at a girl who was equally as fake in her happiness as Kelsey felt she was. Hi, you must be new, she said as she stretched out her hand to Kelsey. I'm Brienne, I'm on the welcoming committee. She's also head cheerleader, said the brunette to her left. And captain of the dance team, said the blonde on her right. Either this school was way smaller than Kelsey thought, or somebody had some favouritism. Just what Kelsey needed. Good to know, Kelsey replied evenly. I've got to get to class, so if you don't mind... Oh, we just wanted to know what you were doing with Dimitri Frey, said the perky Rianne. Kelsey had to make a conscious effort to suppress her laughter. They were jealous. All of them swirling in the green swamp of desperation and envy. Perhaps she could at least get some amusement out of going back to school, if only to watch her brother suffer through unwanted attention. He's my older brother. Why? Kelsey asked innocently. "Oh," Rian gasped, a little taken aback. "We weren't aware he had a sister." "We've got another brother too," Kelsey informed them. "Lawrence. He's out of high school. Anyway, it was nice meeting you." Then Kelsey walked away from the group of teenage girls intent on getting to class. The further she was away from her brother when those girls approached him, the better. Even Dimitri had standards, and those girls fell way below the line. Dimitri gave an annoyed grumble as he opened his locker to exchange books. Another history lesson that failed to live up to his expectations. He couldn't see how the human race ever moved forward with their inability to see the past for what it was. The ancient Greeks had thrived with their oracles. These days, such beings were rare and reserved for those of a more supernatural nature. That didn't mean humans were content with their lot, though. So persistent and determined to create a better world that they failed to see their errors even as they made them. Immortality didn't necessarily solve this problem. It honestly just gave them enough time to realise the pointlessness of it and accept their lot in the world. It had certainly made the centuries a lot more enjoyable to live in the moment. "Dimitri?" The voice was unfamiliar, but the scent of desperation attached to it made him cringe. He really didn't need this right now. He slammed his locker door shut and turned to make a quick escape when a hand snaked around his arm. Dimitri paused, giving his best glare down at the pathetic teenage girl who'd attached herself to him. Yet another reason why Dimitri hated schools. His immortality had more than a few physical perks, not the least of which had given him an ethereal beauty that was hard to resist. Did he take advantage of it? Of course he did, all the time. Just not with high school girls who had nothing better to do than use unnatural amounts of makeup, dress in barely bare clothing, and chase after any attention they could find. Some more ambitious than others. "Dimitri, I met your sister this morning. She's just adorable," the girl grinned, two white teeth peeking at him. Dimitri was positive that adorable was not a word anyone should use to describe Kelsey. Just as polite was not a word anyone would use to describe him. "Get off." The threat in his voice was heard by everyone in hearing range, everyone except the persistent brunette. "Weren't you going to escort me to lunch?" she asked innocently. Dimitri sighed heavily, then gave her a shove. Not one of vampiric strength, obviously. He had enough enemies to deal with. It was just enough that she stumbled and flailed her arms for balance, effectively releasing her grip on his arm. "I think you'll find that reducing me to an escort will be the least of your iniquities if you continue to act like a bimbo." Dimitri could clearly see that his use of the word iniquities had confused her. With that, he made his escape into the crowd without so much as a glance back in her direction. It wasn't hard to work out why the desperate human girl had enough confidence to go after him. Kelsey had no doubt been a great actress that morning. One thing that was scarily accurate about empaths was their ability to manipulate. It didn't take much to ascertain one's desires and use it against them without them being the least bit aware of what was happening. Due to his knowledge of his sister's abilities, Dimitri concluded that his sister was looking for entertainment. He stalked the halls of the school like the predator he was. The children parted before him like the Red Sea, rushing to get out of his way. They may not have been aware of what he was, but some primal part of them knew that they were prey. The cafeteria was large for a small-town school. It was filled to the brim with hungry students. With all the scents assaulting him, it took Dimitri a minute to pin down the location of his sister, in the far corner. He watched from a distance as she picked at the meal before her with what could only be described as sheer boredom. Dimitri's anger ebbed slightly at seeing his sister in such a state he could relate to. He wanted to step forward, then noticed the hot blonde from his first day approaching her table. She was still looking pretty delectable in skinny jeans and a baggy jumper, so it didn't take long for Dimitri to decide to watch from the doorway for a moment. He focused his heightened senses right as she sat opposite his sister. "That bad, huh?" she asked Kelsey. Kelsey looked up to find the blonde looking down at her. Dimitri could tell Kelsey didn't mind this girl as her smile wasn't fake. Dimitri begrudgingly agreed in his silence that she wasn't like the other teenagers in this school. Just attempting to deal with it in my own way, replied Kelsey. I've been homeschooled since the 3rd grade, so getting back into the whole social part of school was a bit overwhelming. With 400 years of experience under their belts, lying came easily to the Freys. It wasn't always for the better, however. Lying had a way of getting away from your initial intentions. I'm sure you'll do fine, smiled the girl. They both looked awkward for a moment before Kelsey took the initiative. I'm Kelsey, by the way. Ashley. Ashley, that was right, Dimitri thought. He'd admit wholeheartedly he'd forgotten. He rarely interacted with humans for longer than necessary. It made forgetting their names pretty natural. At least that was his excuse. Lawrence just called him an arse. Lawrence and every girl he'd ever deigned to remember the name of for his social explorations. So, I heard you're Dimitri's sister. I only told 3 people, Kelsey muttered. Word travels fast. Be careful who you tell. Thanks for the tip, replied Kelsey. Anything else you got? Avoid the jocks, said Ashley. They may be pretty, but at least half of them have some form of an STD. Oh, possibly too much information, but I get the point. Kelsey looked about as disgusted as Dimitri felt. Time to end the conversation before it went anywhere else. Perhaps the one kindness Dimitri would do for his sister today. He approached the table and sat down beside his sister. Kelsey wasn't the least bit surprised. She'd probably sensed him as soon as he walked in. The human Ashley, however, was shocked. Yo, sis, said Dimitri, making friends. This is Ashley, Kelsey introduced. Ashley, this is my brother Dimitri. We met yesterday, said Ashley. Oh. Another awkward moment ensued. This was why Dimitri didn't interact with humans all that often. They were downright boring. Luckily, Kelsey came to the rescue again. So, what classes are you taking, Ashley? Studio art, photography, literature, American history, and sociology, Ashley stated. I'm a humanities person. Artistic too, apparently, replied Kelsey. It's more of a hobby, said Ashley. My dad wants me to get into international relations. Don't you need a second language or something for that? Asked Dimitri as he picked up half the sandwich from Kelsey's tray, which would do nothing but keep his body thinking that he was being sated. Not necessarily, said Ashley, but I suppose it helps that I speak 5 languages. Dimitri choked on the sandwich he had bitten into. How old are you? 17, said Ashley, nearly 18. How? He asked, a rare interest in conversation taking over him. Ashley shrugged. It was just something I enjoyed. My dad made me learn Latin, though. What are the other languages? Prompted Kelsey. Italian, French, and Japanese, said Ashley. And English, of course. Cool, Kelsey said enthusiastically. Dimitri could tell it wasn't all faked, too. What about you? Asked Ashley. What are your subjects? Oh, I'm really just here for history and sociology, said Kelsey. I just need those 2 because I did the others accelerated over the summer while I was in Europe. You went to Europe? Asked Ashley, eyebrows raised. She might have spoken 5 languages, but Dimitri could tell she'd never stepped foot outside of Blue Valley. Yeah, replied Kelsey. I was there for a couple of years travelling with my aunt. I wanted to see my brothers though, so I came back here. What about your parents? Asked Ashley with a confused frown. Our parents are dead, said Dimitri without feeling. Ashley's eyes widened. Oh God, I'm sorry. It's all right, Kelsey said hurriedly, attempting to calm Ashley's sudden distress. They were killed in a car crash a few years ago. Our elder brother has custody over us. Over you, Dimitri corrected. I'm 18. Kelsey rolled her eyes. Wait, you aren't twins? Asked Ashley. No, Kelsey giggled. Why would you think that? It's just, you're in the same grade level, replied Ashley as if her reasoning was obvious, courtesy of Lawrence. Kelsey wouldn't spend any longer in this hellhole than she needed to. Kelsey fancies herself a genius, Dimitri lied quickly. She skipped a grade. Kelsey elbowed him in the ribs. Genius was a word that enticed people to see it proved. She didn't like proving it. Homeschooling has benefits. Ashley nodded with a smile. I'll bet. Never needed it, but it sounds fun. Sometimes, said Kelsey, but not always. There was a short silence at the table before Ashley seemed to light up with the idea that had no doubt graced her mind. Seeing as we're both doing history, do you want to come to the study group I'm having with a couple of other students this afternoon? Kelsey, to Dimitri's surprise, smiled. Sounds good. Where are we meeting? Dimitri decided that now was not the time to state how much of a waste of time this history club would be. They had bigger things to worry about. Kelsey seemed to sense Dimitri's surprise, though, and gave him a look. The look that meant she knew what she was doing. 50% of the time that look landed them in more trouble than anything else. That look had landed them in the Sahara Desert after Kelsey had attempted to teleport to the other side of the world. He supposed it was a good thing that at least made it across the Atlantic. Alan's Diner, said Ashley, pulling Dimitri back to the present. It's free fries Thursday, so Drew wouldn't miss it for the world. Drew? Asked Kelsey. Oh, he's in the study group, Ashley explained, along with Peter and Ridley. I'll introduce them to you this afternoon. We meet at 4:30, so I'll see you there. Of course, said Kelsey as Ashley stood. I've got to get going, Ashley explained. I've been given the job of managing the school-funded events for this year. My parents are really community-minded. No worries, said Kelsey as Ashley picked up her things. I'll see you tonight. It was nice meeting you, said Ashley. You too, bye, replied Kelsey with a smile. Ashley left with a wave and Dimitri dropped his unfinished half of Kelsey's sandwich back onto her tray. A history study group? Asked Dimitri. Seriously? You'll be bored out of your mind. Kelsey sighed. I'm not exactly excited for the topic, but I've got a feeling that there's something important there. Something I'm missing. Dimitri rolled his eyes. His sister's feelings were usually something to pay attention to. So, are we getting help? I don't know yet, said Kelsey. That's why I'm going. Lawrence and I will go for the pool tables, Dimitri offered, just in case your feeling turns out to be a bad one. Kelsey rolled her eyes and stood as the bell rang, dread filling the cafeteria. Whatever. Thanks for the offer, Dimitri. I really appreciate the backup, Dimitri teased, scoffing. Kelsey stalked out of the cafeteria with her books in hand. Dimitri smirked. His victory was small, but it was a victory nonetheless. Hopefully she wouldn't want to pay him back via that annoying bimbo again. Speaking of the devil, she walked in looking around. Dimitri sighed and stood up, knowing now why Kelsey had left at the warning bell along with all the other nerds. She'd sensed the bimbo coming and wanted to be out of firing range before she descended. Dimitri turned to head out of the back door of the cafeteria. Oh, Dimitri, damn it to hell. Well, that's it for Storytime episode 10 and chapter 6 of The Blood King. A little bit of high school drama in there for poor Kelsey, who's has to feel everybody's emotions at any one time, and goodness me, what a place a high school is for that. So, I will talk to you next time, guys. Stay happy and healthy. Bye.